from the All Indiana Podcast Network.
It's time for real conversation about the real issues that affect our communities.
Poverty, education, equality, and more.
This is Real Talk.
Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Welcome to Real Talk on the All Indiana Podcast Network. I'm Reverend Charles Harrison, and on this episode, has the violence in Indianapolis taken a turn for the better? Well, let's talk about that in 2025. Are we seeing signs that violence in Indianapolis is taking a dramatic decline? Welcome to the All Indiana Broadcast Network. This is Reverend Harrison, and this is Real Talk. I am so glad to be back in the studio today, and I want to talk about something that, you know, I've been dealing with for years in Indianapolis. And for many of you know who follow me, I am the board president of the Indianapolis 10-Point Coalition, which is a faith-based group in the city comprised of about 15 churches that for the last 26 years has taken on the issue of addressing the issue of violence in our city, particularly urban violence, as it impacts young men of color between the ages of 12 and 24 years old. The vast majority of our churches are on the west side of Indianapolis, around the 29th and MLK area. And we really focus on 29th and MLK, Highland Vicinity, Crown Hill, Butler Tarkington, some in Riverside over the years, and then Mapleton Fall Creek. So when we started in 1999, those were kind of the areas that we focused on the west side of Indianapolis. And then on the east side of Indianapolis, we have done work in a variety of places back in the day, in the Meadows, then down at 16th and College. I almost forgot about that. And Citizens, they used to call the neighborhood back then, at 16th and College. They called it Dodge City. That was one of the most violent, areas of the city back in 1999 when 10 Point started. So those were kind of the areas that we have really focused on. And we have seen over the years, I think basically from 99 to about 2012, Indianapolis had really done an exceptional job, in addressing the issue of urban violence, particularly for a large metropolitan city like Indianapolis, with various other cities, in Marion County or around the Indianapolis area. And certainly we had a very strong collaborative partnership. I think one of the strengths of Indianapolis back in 1999 was all of the collaborative partnerships that were developed from the mayor's office to the prosecutor's office, law enforcement, the sheriff's office, what is known today as IMPD, the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the courts, probation, parole. I mean, all of us were working together back then for a single purpose. We were in conversation with each other on a regular basis. And then you had faith-based leaders like myself, community leaders that represented community centers, other grassroots organizations. And we were all kind of on one page. And our purpose was, how can we reduce the level of violence in the city of Indianapolis that we were seeing coming off of a record-breaking year in 1998. And I think we did an exceptional job, with Mayor Goldsmith at the time, and then from Mayor Goldsmith, the 8 years of Mayor Peterson, and then the 8 years of Mayor Ballard, from 1999 to about 2000. And 12 in particularly were great years where we saw probably an average of about 96 murders a year, and about 114 homicides a year. Some years it would go up, other years it would go down. And I really think the strength of that was the collaborative partnership that we had, where we were all talking together on a regular basis, where we were working together to try to address the violence that we were seeing in the city. And I thought we did an exceptional job in doing that as a city. I think with the whole Weed and Seed initiative, I think Indianapolis was one of the cities across the country, that was kind of leading the way when it came to violence that we were seeing in larger cities, particularly in communities of color, where disproportionately in communities of color we were seeing large numbers of people being killed. And sadly, in Indianapolis, even back then, when the numbers were low, 70 to 80% of the homicide victims tended to be black. And it was something that really got the black church really involved in this issue, because we were being directly impacted by our members, our family members of our members, or it was happening in the neighborhoods where our churches were located. So it was something that we decided to take on, particularly as a faith community, to really try to address this issue of violence. From about 2013 up until now 2025, there have been concerns about the level of violence, particularly from 2013 to 2024. We've seen a dramatic surge in violence from what we were seeing, pre-2012. But this year, as we go into 2025, I'm a little more encouraged about the numbers. I've been a critic. I've been a critic of what's been going on in the city, and I kind of go back to that, a little later in the broadcast of my criticism, as to what's been going on in the city. I've been on the ground. I've been boots on the ground. I've been walking the streets of Indianapolis now for about 26 years. So there's a lot I've seen over those years. There's a lot I've seen on the ground over the years. I am very opinionated, certainly about what I think works and what does not work. When the city, I felt like, was doing an exceptional job of reducing violence in the city, and when I think the city struggled. Right now, in 2025, I'm really encouraged. I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged that I think we seem to, for right now, we haven't quite made it through 2 months yet, but for the first 52 days of the year, I am a little more encouraged about this year. It's a different feel out there so far than what we have experienced, particularly for the last 10 years, from about 2015 to 2024, when we have seen record-breaking violence in the city. It has been the highest level of shootings, stabbings, and homicides that Indianapolis has experienced in its history. And during those years, that's when I was pretty critical. Right now, in 2025, after 52 days, we've had 78 people have been shot, 30 people stabbed, and from that, it has led to 20 homicides in the city. So 20 people have been killed so far in the first 52 days. And based on the first 52 days, and we try to measure this, based on where we are, how many homicides we are experiencing in the course of a week, in the course of a month, it helps us somewhat project what those numbers may be at the end of the year, though those numbers will go up and down based on what's happening that week or that month. So those numbers will vary. But right now, after 52 days, in 2025, the city is on pace for about 140 homicides. That is a dramatic decline from what we have experienced the last 5 years, when we have seen 200 plus homicides a year. And since 2015, It is the lowest number that we have probably seen since about 2013. So 140 homicides is probably the number we experienced around 2013. That is very encouraging. It is very encouraging for right now. And I know we're still in the winter months, and a lot of people, when I've been posting this, have been saying, well, Reverend, it's cold, so we don't have as many homicides when the weather's cold. That has really not been true over the last 10 years. Over the last 10 years, the numbers that we have experienced in January and February has been concerning. See, once you get to about 17 homicides a month, that puts you over the 200 homicide number for the year. We have gotten as high as about 22 homicides, 23 homicides a month, which is in 2021 when we experienced about 172 homicides. We had, I think that year, 4 or 5 mass shootings that year that, really created problems for the city as far as elevating the numbers that we experienced in that year. But even, when you take out all of the mass shootings in 2021, the city still would have been on a pace for over 200 plus homicides. So in the last 5 years, we have averaged more than 17 homicides a month. Right now in 2025, in the first almost 2 months, we still have several more days to go in February of 2025. We're averaging about 10 homicides a month. So right now it's about 7 homicides under where you need to be in order to exceed 200 homicides again. In my opinion, I think by January, February, March is going to tell us a lot about where we're going to be at toward as far as yearly numbers. If your numbers are low in January, February, and March, then the chances are you're going to have a much better year than what we have seen in the last 5 years when we have been over 200 plus homicides. In order for those numbers to really dramatically go up, say for instance, we end up averaging about 12 homicides a month after the first 3 months, well, you're going to be well under 200 homicides for the year, which is what the goal is. We're trying to get that number back down to under 200 a year, and then ultimately, what I've been pushing and what I think we can get back to is those 20, what I would call 13 numbers. When you start talking about from 2000 to 2012, when we averaged about 96 murders, about 114 homicides. I really think that Indianapolis can really get back to that number. I think there have been things that have happened in Indianapolis over the last 10 years that has prevented us from having the same kind of numbers that we were having, from 2000 to 2012. And I kind of want to talk about that because I think there were certain things that we did very well from 2000 to 2012 that helped us to keep those low numbers. One of the things I talked about was the collaborative partnerships between law enforcement, the city, the courts, the prosecutor's office, and the judges. I think that was crucial in the success that we were having in the city, because when we were having those weekly, monthly meetings, we were identifying hotspot areas in the city, hotspot individuals or hot groups or hot individuals in the city. So we will identify whether it be a drug dealer, drug dealers, whether it be gangs or cliques in neighborhood that was a threat to the peace or causing the violence, or what some people would call, when we say hot people, who the shooters were. And we would identify those, and those individuals would certainly be our target. because we would have to get them off the street or certainly redirect their lives down a different path so that they were not a problem when it came to the violence that we were experiencing in neighborhoods. So we kind of coordinate our efforts between what grassroots groups were doing, what anti-violence groups was doing, what community centers could do when it came to reaching that target group that was most likely the perpetrators of violence and individuals who would be most likely the victims of the violence. And then there were times where law enforcement had to do their job as law enforcement, and sometimes they would come in and do raids. They would have heavy patrols in the area, and those patrols would certainly impact what I call the underground economy, the drug trafficking. We would target individuals that would need to be arrested, and law enforcement work toward that with the prosecutor's office to get those most dangerous people off the streets. And those were the things that we did very well from 2000 to 2012. And that collaborative partnership, because sometimes if law enforcement has to come into an area and particularly saturate an area or have heavy patrols, then they would certainly need the support of community leaders, community stakeholders, to stand with them so that there wouldn't be pushback in the neighborhood from people who may have opposed that. So when you had pastors and community leaders standing with law enforcement and kind of giving the blessing for law enforcement to come in and clean out, areas in the city so that we could reduce the level of violence that we were seeing, that was effective, because what people would see in the community as community leaders and law enforcement and the mayor's office and the prosecutor all standing together, saying the same things, and working together to significantly reduce the level of crime and violence that we were seeing in a particular area that was creating a public safety crisis for that area. So that was the first thing that I think we did very well from 2000 to 2012. The second thing is that we really focused on holding repeat violent offenders accountable. And that was key. Part of what we would do back then would be those what we call lever puller meetings, where we would call in individuals who were either on probation or parole, and have those meetings with the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Marion County Prosecutor, law enforcement, and community leaders. And we certainly would encourage individuals to take advantage of many of the programs that would help particularly ex-offenders assimilate back into society and become productive citizens, but also send a message to those individuals that violence was not going to be tolerated. And we did an effective job of doing that. Sometimes there would be probation sweeps where probation and law enforcement would visit people on parole, on probation, to their homes to check for guns and other things that might be in the house, that particularly drugs that they may have violated their probation or parole. That was very effective, because if you were on probation or parole and you were still out there selling drugs and carrying a weapon, then that was a problem. That was a problem that helped create more violence in the neighborhood. So I think the fact that we were very effective at holding people accountable who were repeat violent offenders, I think was one of the tools that we use in a very effective way to keep the level of violence down. I really feel like that if we would have kept that in place, before some things were done in 2011 by the City County Council, I think we could have got the murder numbers in Indianapolis below 90. I think that we had so much stuff going on right in the city that we could have effectively help lower those numbers even more. The third thing that I think we did very effectively was the role that the philanthropic community played along with the city in providing resources, grants to community centers, to grassroots organizations, to anti-violence group. And those monies were based on, or resources was based on, what we knew were evidence-based strategies that help reduce urban violence, particularly urban violence among young people. Different groups had different focuses when it came to, who their target group was to reduce the violence. But I think that the philanthropic community and the city did an effective job of identifying community centers, grassroots organizations, and anti-violence groups that were doing very effective work in areas of the city that we were experiencing the highest level of violence, particularly within the urban core, where we were seeing the greatest level of violence. And we knew that there was about 6 or 7 zip codes or areas that we were getting the vast majority of the shootings, the stabbings, the homicides, and the criminal homicides. And we really focus on those areas and trying to provide resources to those evidence-based initiatives that we knew were effective in helping to reduce violence. The role was always, how do we reduce criminal homicides and shootings and stabbings in these hotspot areas? And that was always the focus. And in doing that, we had groups that directly dealt with those individuals who were most likely to be either the perpetrators or the victims of violence. And we had other groups that focused on addressing root causes so that we were preventing, a new group of individuals getting involved in the underground economy that would cause them to be either shooters or perpetrators of violent crimes or victims. So that was kind of the strategy. Now, a lot of people have been asking me, and for those who are just joining, this is Real Talk podcast with Reverend Charles Harrison. I am the senior pastor of Barnes United Methodist Church, but a lot of people know me as the leader of the Indianapolis 10-Point Coalition, and I am a board member of 10-Point. I am one of many pastors that's a part of the organization, but certainly my role as the board chair has become a role, a face that many people see a lot on television, or you hear my voice on the radio as I talk about the work that we do as Indy 10-Point. But people have really been asking me, well, what's the difference? Because I post these numbers, on a weekly basis as to where we are. So what has happened in 2025 that we have really seen a dramatic decline in shooting, stabbings, homicides, and criminal homicides, so that now we're on a pace for at least the first 52 days for under 200 homicides. I think there's a couple things that are going on that is leading to our success, and I think we tried to point to it, myself and Rick Snyder, who is the president of the FOP 86, in a press conference that we did in downtown Indianapolis in 2019. We had just had a mass shooting downtown in front of the mall downtown. 6 individuals were shot. Many of those involved were juveniles. And one of the things that me and Rick Snyder tried to emphasize, and certainly Rick brings the perspective from law enforcement, IMPD. I bring the perspective from 10-Point and other groups in the city who have boots on the ground. And groups like 10-Point, we're in the neighborhood, we're on the ground. It is those things that we see almost on a daily basis when it comes to these hotspot areas and what's kind of driving the violence. So groups like 10 Point, we can probably tell you in the hotspot areas who the individuals are that are most likely to be the perpetrators of violent crimes or the victims. We know the groups, whether they be gangs or cliques, that may be a problem in an area, or it may be a drug dealer or drug dealers that are a problem. We say there's another group which we call the stick-up boys. Those are the individuals that are most likely to be the robbers, and normally they're trying to either rob a drug dealer or a drug house, and that's going to cause a problem. I mean, if you're going to go in and rob a drug dealer or a drug house, then it's going to lead to drama. It's going to lead to drama. More likely, it's going to lead to violence. Even if you got away with the robbery, if they know who you are, then they're going to come and get you. A lot of times, the robbery would lead into a shooting. Either the drug dealer or the people in the house where the drugs would end up shooting the individuals that were trying to rob them, or the people who were people who were doing the robbery shot the people inside who had the money or the drugs. We brought that perspective when we did the press conference in 2019 downtown, myself and Rick. He brought it from the perspective of law enforcement. I came from the perspective of grassroots organizations and anti-violence groups. And we could see back then that there was, a proliferation of guns in the hands of people who lawfully should not have had those guns, whether they be juveniles or felons. And the other piece that we were concerned about was the lack of accountability for repeat violent offenders. And there were a lot of initiatives that were happening in the city, particularly the initiative of repeat violent offenders that were on home detention with the ankle bracelet. And a lot of those individuals who were on home detention or with the ankle bracelet were really not doing what they were supposed to do. Many of them, even though they had the ankle bracelet, were still out in the street involved in criminal activity. Many of them were still carrying guns. They were still selling drugs or whatever criminal activity that they were involved in prior to being arrested. And certainly that was a concern that we had. We also had a concern of, the low bail. When people were arrested, the bond was so low, either low bond or no bond, and people were getting right back out on the street. Well, that was a problem, particularly if you're trying to encourage residents in the neighborhood to come forward with information to police. Well, nobody's going to come forward with information to police to help put the shooters or the killers behind bars if you know that they're going to get right back out on the street, and then you're going to become a victim of a retaliation. And those were the things that we started seeing happening starting in about 2012, up and through, I think, this year. Our major concern was that the courts and the prosecutor's office was not doing a very good job of holding repeat violent offenders accountable. It was kind of the catch and release. That's what we kind of call it, catch and release. They were being arrested by IMPD, and they were right back out on the street. So those were the things that we felt like was creating a problem, on the streets of Indianapolis that was leading to the surge in violence. So we had already seen a surge in violence that led to what we had about 4 in a row years from 2015 to 2018, 2015, 16, 17, 18. The city had 4 consecutive years of breaking criminal homicide records. And then in 2019, we didn't break a criminal homicide record, but it was still one of the highest years for homicides in the history of the city. And since then, the city just saw the violence escalate to by 2020, which what me and Rick Snyder saw. We saw that the violence was going to increase, and we were right on target. We were right on target in our prediction that even though we were experiencing about 170 plus homicides, we saw that number exceeding 200. And when we did that press conference in the fall of 2019 downtown, we knew that the city was in trouble and was going to experience a second surge in violence, and that's what happened. In 2020, the city experienced 200 plus homicides, and we have experienced that since. But this year, I'm more hopeful because I'm not seeing as many repeat violent offenders on the streets when I'm out with 10 Point, and I'm getting that from the OGs and patrol teams of 10 Point. They are sharing with me that they are not seeing guys that they know who are repeat violent offenders on the streets now in the numbers that they were even a year ago. And I think that is good. I think that if we're going to get our hands around it, then we certainly have to hold the shooters and the stabbers accountable. And we got to get those individuals off the street. You know, if you're not trying to do right and you're still trying to be in the game and you're still trying to live the thug and the gangster lifestyle, then we got to get you off the street. We cannot have you in these high crime neighborhoods as an individual who is lighting the match to the fire and causing that area that you are in to burn with violence. We just cannot have that. We cannot have people who feel like that they can commit violent acts of crime and they're going to get away with it, that they're not going to be held accountable. And I think we're starting to do that. I think we're starting to do that now. And I think if we continue to do that, the homicide number can be under 150 or lower this year. If we do that. I know we're coming into the warm months starting, particularly in another couple of months, and then the summer months. But if we can keep repeat violent offenders off the streets, then we're certainly going to be under 200 homicides in 2025. But we can make a real significant difference, and we can see a significant decline in the number of people that are being murdered and just killed, because someone had to shoot and kill someone because of self-defense, because they were involved in some kind of criminal act against someone, in the city, and then that individual felt like they had to shoot someone that may have led to that person's death. So I think that's one of the things. I think the second thing that is really encouraging is that the philanthropic community, I think, is doing a great job in providing grants and resources to grassroots organizations and anti-violence groups. There's a lot of groups out there doing some good work. And I know there's some people who feel like that putting money into these groups does not reduce violence. I would say that's not true. Even when we were having 200 plus homicides a year, if it wasn't for the grassroots organizations, the community centers, the anti-violence groups, those numbers would have been 300 plus. If it wasn't for the work that was being done by those groups. I think a lot of groups are doing a lot of different stuff. We're all doing different stuff, 10 Point is a group that does the boots on the ground, so we're doing more intervention and prevention on the ground and certainly working with law enforcement for enforcement. There are other groups who work on addressing the root causes of violence, and they do, a lot of great work. Groups that are mentoring young people so that young people who have been given a bad hand in life, who may live in one of these hotspot areas, who are being influenced by drug dealers and gangs and cliques to become a part of their criminal enterprise, are doing a good job of helping these kids stay on a path of success. So there's a lot of good groups out there that are doing exceptional work, and it takes all of us. It takes groups like 10 Point that are boots on the ground. It takes other groups who are providing mentoring programs or athletic initiatives or academic enrichment programs. All of those things are really making a difference in these hotspot areas and helping to reduce the number of people who are involved in the underground economy. And I think the philanthropic community, where it be CICF or now Lilly Endowment, are doing an exceptional job. And I think it is because of their work, their partnership, and providing grants and resources to a lot of groups in these hotspot areas has been also one of the factors, along with what IMPD is doing, because we cannot take away from the exceptional work that law enforcement is doing. But I think it's been the combination of all of this that has led to, so far, day 52 is today, that the city has seen a significant reduction in violence compared to the last 4 years. And I'm hoping that that's going to continue. And I think that if the prosecutor's office and the courts continue to keep repeat violent offenders off the streets, and if the philanthropic community continues to do the work that they're doing, and then IMPD, which would be the third piece, the work that they're doing with everybody, and they're doing a good job with what Chief Bailey is doing with all of his district commanders and working with grassroots organizations, community centers, anti-violence groups, and partnering with us. I think the combination of all three of those things is going to lead to a much better year in 2025. What the numbers are going to look like, I don't know yet, but I think in the next 3 months, we're going to have a good idea as to where we might end up in 2025. It's not a guarantee because we got to get through the summer months and the first 2 months of the fall, September and October, because normally starts to slow down again by the time we get to mid-November. But I certainly think that in the next couple of months, we're going to have a better idea where we may be at the end of 2025 and kind of what the feel is in the city. But I think we have seen so far a dramatic turn, and we hope and pray that it continues. And I think we got to give a lot of people credit for that. I think what the city's doing with its initiatives have been helpful too, along with grassroots organizations, anti-violence groups, community centers. Everybody's doing their part, community stakeholders. And Indy, if we continue to do that, this is going to be a good year. I continue to believe that the goal of this city ought to be to get these homicide numbers and criminal homicide numbers down to where they were pre-2013, when we started talking about from 2000 to 2012. That ought to be our goal. And we ought not to stop until we get there. We should not be satisfied until we get to that number that we used to have, where we were averaging less than 100 murders a year. That's where we want to be. And then once we get there, then we can set new goals as a city. But certainly, I think in the next couple of years, we can get back to where we were. I think it's been a good start in 2025 so far. We got to keep it going. I'm encouraged. When things are not going well, I'm vocal about it. You hear me. But when things are going well, I'm also going to be vocal about that and say that I think there's some good things going on the ground. So I want to thank the prosecutor. I want to thank the courts and the judges for the work you're doing so far. We continue to applaud IMPD for the exceptional work that they're doing on the ground. And then I want to give out a shout out to all the grassroots organizations, all the community centers, all the little athletes, coaches that are coaching Little League sports, and then all the anti-violence groups like 10 Point that are down on the ground doing their thing day after day, risking their lives to make this a safer city. I believe in Indianapolis we're heading in the right direction. Let's keep it up. Let's keep doing what we're doing because I want this city to once again be one of the model cities in America when it comes to large cities in the work that we're doing to help curb urban violence. We can do this. We can continue to bring these numbers down. We can continue to restore hope to those individuals who are hopeless, and we can create safe neighborhoods in areas of our city that have been known for high crime. We can do this. Let's do it, Indianapolis. This has been Rev Harrison on Real Talk, and I hope that you have enjoyed this conversation that I've had today concerning violence in Indianapolis. I want to invite you also to subscribe to a Real Talk podcast with Rev Charles Harrison. And when you listen to this podcast, I ask that you subscribe and share it on Facebook and Twitter so that more people can hear this podcast and we can continue to have real talk about the real issues that affect us here in Indianapolis, that affect us in the state of Indiana, and affect us nationally. This is Rev Harrison. Have a blessed and awesome day. Peace.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast.
And be sure to check out other great podcasts on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Online now at allindianapodcast.com.